just wasn't it, so.
When this was fixed up.
So is this an original pump?
That's the way this was
Believe
built.
so.
Huh? You know, I don't like heights.
Yeah, I'm not, I don't, I know, I was a little skeptic too, because I don't like to.
I can't go,
I'm not a big heights person. I don't look well over edges by any means.
yeah.
It's very secure, promise.
I don't care how safe I am, just looking down there, yeah.
Yeah.
It's me.
Wow.
I
Not
can't,
at all what I thought it was like.
Everybody in here?
We're all
Yep,
here.
we're
You
here.
can talk
Okay.
away. Tell us
Okay,
all about this.
I probably go first if I talk to each one of you separate, so, I was just asked about these round circles in here. And those were bridge planks. This well was built from the walls were built from the top down. So what they did, when they started, after they dug down a ways, they went out here and dug down about 3.5 feet there, the first ring, and they sharpened bridge planks. Now, the bridge planks are 3 inches thick, and they sharpened them and then drove them back into the dirt 3 feet. And then they came in here and they laid rocks on top of that and cemented them together. Once the cement had gone hard, then they came in and they dug out another section underneath those bridge planks. Bridge planks stayed there. And then they dug out and they laid the next ring about 4 foot of rocks. And they continued clear to the bottom. That's what the brown things are. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when we got it fixed up so we could bring people in, you could still see bridge planks sticking out there. They're rotting away.
Especially over on this side.
so what, now, is this for water for the town, or what was this?
This was the city's water supply, and you'll have to look at their brochure. I'm not sure the exact date, 1897 or something like that, when it was built. And this was the city's water supply until, actually we started supplemented in 1916 or 1913, somewhere in that range. And there again, I'm losing myself. I was city clerk here. I know all this stuff because I read it in the city minutes, but it's going away. City minutes are still there. But anyway, it was the single supply until there in the early the teens to the 20s, and I don't know exactly the date on that. They needed more water. They bought some land out east of town here in the hill, and there's 3 springs out there. They never did harvest the third one, but it flows to town without any pumps at 40,000 gallons a day. And so back then in that time, they ran a line clear from out there, clear through town, and dumped it into here. That supplemented this well because we were growing and they just didn't have enough water here. In 1937, I believe it was, they knew we just weren't going to have enough water, and they went out and bought some little plots of ground out east of town, north of the highway, and they sunk 3 wells. Not all of them at the same time, but in about a year and a half's time, I think it was. That then was pumped into here, and it held out and kept us going. And then eventually they built a 1-million-gallon underground, or submerged anyway, down here on First Street. There's a big hump in the ground next to to a parking lot, you can see the hump, but there's 1 million gallons of water sitting underground there. And once that was done, I think they quit then using the well itself, directed all those wells and the springs into that down there. And they built a processing center or building there to, sanitize the water. You can't drink water out of the ground anymore, But, that's the story with this, and it sat here basically unused at all from the 40s on up. And there's a side story, right outside the door there, there's a big manhole cover. And so there's this, I think it's an 8-inch line going over across the street, and we had a police officer who worked here one night, and he came by, and there was water, ice, clear around the outside here.
Uh-oh.
Short story, the line had been leaking for who knows how long.
Oh, no.
And it filled this, and the water was going out over the tops of the rock. They fixed that shortly. But we were pumping purified water out into the ground. And there was a plumber that lived about 3 blocks down the street here that was a good friend of mine. Well, when you work for 30 years at the city hall, you get to be friends with it. Anyway, he came in one day to pay light and water bill. He says, when you fixed that leak, my well went dry. He had about a 30-foot, 35-foot well in his backyard. Well, it had water in it. He used it to pump it to water his lawn with. So he's giving me a hard time about that, his going because we fixed it. He knew what had happened, but we had water, a water table out here that much higher than it is today. Now, if you're looking down at the bottom here, the water level today, that ring where the wall comes in smaller, that's 15 foot from there down. So there's about 15 foot of water in here today. When they built this, it's not necessarily in the minutes, but you have to figure it out. When they got down to that level, I think they were having to pump out more water than they could work with. And they brought the wall in about 3 foot. That's why you see that ledge there. And that's a brick ledge, or brick walls from there down. That also gives, coming through the bricks a little more room for water to come in. But they would have had to have had engine pumps pumping all the time when they were working down at the bottom anyway. And just to keep, dump the water out. Incidentally, all the dirt that was here on this spot is out here on this city block. This cow pasture out here. And, people had cows out there in the corner or this or that. The city had bought up all these lots, and so they just spread the dirt out here.
How deep is it?
64 feet.
Oh, it's a long way down.
Triple the little
It's
2 feet.
fed by the Ogallala.
Ogallala? Yeah, that is right.
So this to my husband.
Ogallala. Go.
I've got actually one for all of you ladies.
I know, I told you, I used to know. But, it's the area of underwater that is,
Does he know about that?
it's all over under the country, but there's just different places where there's no water right there. And,
I noticed the little
So how
things.
many people actually dug on it? Did
I
they have
don't
Takes-
know.
Takes a couple times to prime it.
And I should have researched, or should research yet if I
Be
ever
nice.
want to the contractor from Kansas City that they had hired to
No,
dig
it's
this
working.
well and put in the water lines in town. It was a big project. He was digging this
give
well
up.
and he walked off the job. He left his equipment and they couldn't get him back. So, several months later, of course,
I'd have some, but my purse is at home.
Nobody was gonna do much. They hired a local man, experienced person, to finish this job. And they hired local people who were able to do the work. And I don't know whether I don't know what happened to the machinery. Did they buy it from the contractor? Did they just take it from him because he didn't do his job? Anyway, you know, they had to use equipment to pull this dirt up out of here. You don't throw it 65 feet. That always reminds me of that story about the guy that was Muleville in the hole. You ever hear it? Yeah, they couldn't get him out, you know. Well, you just get the neighbors and just bury him right there. Pretty soon he walked out, you know, because it hit him on the back, but he dropped it down and he walked out. Oh, you can drop that part out of it.
It's good color, Bob.
Anyway, it was, this thing was sitting here, and those of you, it's gonna be hard to see, but there is a pipe that goes almost straight out that way. There used to be a big block building, rock building, not blocks, sitting out here in the corner, and it was the pump station for this. They had gasoline-driven engines in there, and each one was sitting on its own foundation in the building and all. For some reason, they wanted to lower these pumps, and in the minutes, there's descriptions of how they were to do this, and they lowered each one of these pumps and continued to pump water. And that pumped the water from out of here up to the water tower, which stood about out there where the concrete bench is. It was just a standpipe. And we took that down in 1976 when we built this half-million-gallon water tower across here. So part of the system, you know, was still used back till 76. This, like I said, was pumped with gas engines out there until 1920 something, 27, somewhere in there, when there was another building put up, and the city had a generating system. We generated our own power at that time. Before that, any generated power was provided by individual financiers, I guess you'd call them, or, you know. One man had dug some lines and the story goes, and I'm sure it's right, that when they did that, 9 o'clock at night, he would blink the lights twice. 5 minutes later, he shut the power off for the night. You know, you got time to go get the candles and whatever. Anyway, the city finally put in their own power plant, and at that time, this electric pump was put in.
Oh, that's what this is, an electric pump?
That is the pump, yes.
So
First
it
one and
wasn't
only.
a hand, it wasn't,
No.
it wasn't one of these.
No, one of those things, this turbine pump.
They might have brought their buckets.
Yeah, in case you're worried, you're standing on two 16-inch and this is sitting on those IVs too, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Not gonna get your feet wet,
When did has this always been?
Yes, this has always been,
enclosed?
the original, and I think there's a picture on the brochure, this little top up here came to a peak. I don't know when the peak was taken off and they put a flat roof up there, but that much was changed. And from the time I started with the city until now, it's been reshingled 3 times. Used to be, the story goes, that the kids would come and it was not fenced. It was not fenced until sometime in the early 70s. And we did it only for safety purposes. Kids were climbing up and sliding down. I don't know how many jeans got torn, but but anyway, you know.
It looks like there's louvers up there. Is that to let,
There's what?
is that louvers up there to let light in or?
Yeah, this is open, you know.
Yeah.
I'm glad you were late because there was leaves and stuff here. I've asked Carly to get us she's on the city council. To get a vacuum sweeper. So
We'll work on it.
Yeah, it's louvered.
It'll be put on the next agenda.
That's right.
You know, moisture can go out or air can come in, it's just, and
But for the most part, this is locked up
I
all the time.
Yes.
don't know, I don't see birds in here, so I think it's bird proof, although it's just open. The first time I ever came in here to look at fixing this up, I think it was 1972, somewhere in that, I almost went through this here.
Oh, no.
They had stored crap in here. And when they took down the old building over here, they saved the big windows. And they were piled up in here, and there was other stuff piled. And these boards had rotted, and I stepped on one, and there's only one end that was gonna hold me. I can't swim.
Neither can I.
But anyway, we had council people that were, well, you know, okay, we ought to open that up for people to see. And then, well, how do we do that? And it took a while before anybody was interested enough. I was telling Carly today about it. I couldn't get a carpenter when it came in, and I don't know how we'd do that. And I got so disgusted, I drew up the plans, and here's what I want. He came and looked at me, oh, well, we can do that. And so he did that. This is half-inch plexiglass.
Yep.
We didn't have any walls on this one. We just had the open bridge.
That would have been a little scary.
Wouldn't bring my kids in here.
No, we put up all the wiring, you know, this stuff. And the only thing we did to change the looks of it, we put these 4 posts in here just so that we could.
Yeah, me neither. But I'm,
Otherwise,
Benji
we don't
needs
have
that
any
help.
like that.
Put my church choir director.
So you don't use this anymore, right?
No. No, I'm telling you about the water leak thing. We, the golf course used to be across here where the high school is. And, they needed water to water the roof. And somebody got the idea, well, what about this? And they ran a test on it as well, and that's when it was full of water. Oh, yeah, you can take so many thousand gallons a day out of this and water the golf course. So they put 2 pumps in here, ran the lines across under 11th Street over here, and watered the golf course. And it lasted for about 3 years, and then we took it. Very interesting. The well went dry.
Oh, no.
So it's not been used since that, no. In fact, it just sat here. Unfortunately, people, we even had a man on a local board that he thought the city ought to just fill this in. He think it was expensive to dig it, you know, what would it cost today to fill it? Really? But anyway, that was the story there. I don't know what else I should be saying. We have lights under there so you can see when it was made. I've asked them to put a spotlight over here on this, where this pipe goes out because there was a tunnel. It's about 4.5 feet tall. The bottom part of it is concrete. And when they put the concrete in, there are 2 railroad rails in the concrete. And clear out there to that corner. And then the top part is a horseshoe shape laid up with brick. Of course, I'll lay some brick up. But that's what it is. It was about 4.5 foot tall. So, you know, most people had to bend over to get through it. But that's the pipes that carried the water back.
Well, I want to say thank you for letting us
Thank
come
you.
in and see